The rain had been falling hard for hours, drumming against the old stone walls of Ashford Hall and turning the rolling fields of the Cotswolds into a muddy sea. Thunder growled overhead, and every so often, lightning flashed, illuminating the edges of the vast estate in stark, ghostly white. Most people in the village had long retreated indoors, but Lord Alexander Ashford, 32 and heir to one of England's oldest country families, was still up, unable to sleep. He was pacing the study, his barber jacket hanging by the door, a battered pair of riding boots waiting on the mat. The wind rattled the windows, whistling through cracks in the old glass, and Alex kept glancing outside, uneasy. He couldn't put his finger on it, but something felt wrong. Artemis, his silver-gray Hanoverian polo stallion, had been restless all evening, stomping and neighing in the stable, never a good sign. The horses always sensed trouble before any human did. It happened suddenly, a high, urgent whinny, more piercing than thunder, coming from the direction of the old bomb shelter at the far edge of the estate. Alex froze. For a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Then Artemis cried out again, louder, almost frantic. Alex's heart slammed against his chest. He grabbed his flashlight and yanked on his jacket, not bothering with an umbrella. The rain slapped his face as he sprinted across the courtyard, boots sinking into the mud, water streaming down his collar. Each step was a struggle against the wind, but he pushed on, adrenaline and worry propelling him forward. As he crossed the lawn, the silhouette of the bomb shelter, an ancient concrete relic from World War II, loomed ahead. Artemis's shape moved in the storm, the horse's muscles taut, head thrown high as he circled near the entrance, hooves churning up mud. The beam of Alex's flashlight swept across the ground, catching silver raindrops and the anxious glint in Artemis's eyes. The stallion reared back as Alex approached, but didn't run. He was protecting something. Alex slowed, whispering to Artemis, hand outstretched. "Easy, boy, it's me," he murmured, his voice barely audible above the storm. Artemis snorted, trembling, then stamped a hoof as if demanding Alex hurry. The air near the shelter was thick with fear and wet earth. Alex shone his light into the open doorway, squinting past the rain. For a second, he saw nothing. Then his breath caught. There, huddled in the shadows against the damp, mossy wall, was a woman, young, soaked, and shivering. She cradled a small bundle against her chest, trying to shield it from the rain blowing in. The light flickered across her face, drawn and exhausted, her dark eyes wide with terror and exhaustion. The bundle moved. A baby, no more than a toddler, limp and eerily quiet. Alex moved closer, the mud sucking at his boots. "Hey, are you all right?" he began, but the woman didn't answer. Her head lolled, eyelids fluttering. The baby's lips were tinged blue, face pinched with cold. Something in Alex's chest twisted. He crouched down, ignoring the mud seeping through his pants, and gently touched the woman's shoulder. Her skin was ice cold. "We need to get you inside," he said, voice steady despite the rush of fear. The woman's grip tightened around her child. Then her eyes rolled back and she slumped, unconscious. Panic threatened to overwhelm him. He checked the baby. Girl, tiny, barely breathing, skin frighteningly pale. Without thinking, he shrugged off his jacket, wrapping it around both mother and child. "Hold on," he whispered, as much to himself as to them. Artemis pawed at the ground, tossing his head. Alex glanced at the stallion. Artemis had always been calm in chaos, the kind of horse you wanted in a storm or on a battlefield. Now, his presence felt almost miraculous. Alex heaved the woman into his arms, surprised at how light she was. He cradled the baby to his chest, holding both as securely as he could, and staggered out into the deluge. Artemis sidled closer, lowering his massive head, breath steaming in the night. Alex hoisted the woman up across Artemis's back, then climbed up himself, settling the baby safely against his chest. Artemis didn't flinch. He understood the urgency. "Let's go, boy," Alex said, digging his heels in. The stallion surged forward, galloping across the field toward the lights of the house, hooves pounding through water and mud, mane flying like a silver banner behind him. Alex clung tight to his fragile cargo, shielding them from the rain, praying they could hang on just a little longer. Lightning flashed, throwing their shadows huge and wild across the fields. Somewhere in the night, a camera lens clicked, a paparazzi lurking for scandal, catching the silhouette of the young lord fleeing through the storm with two strangers. As the horse thundered up to the stable, Alex shouted for help, voice cracking in the wind. The estate's security lights blazed on, and servants rushed outside, startled by the sight, their lord soaked to the bone, carrying a woman and child who looked more dead than alive. "Call Dr. Harrison now," Alex barked, pushing past the crowd. The butler scrambled for his phone, hands shaking. Inside, the house was warm and golden, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. Alex laid the woman and child on the nearest sofa, barking orders as if back in the army. Towels, blankets, hot water, he demanded everything at once. The little girl barely whimpered as he pressed her tiny body to his chest, trying to transfer what little warmth he had left. The storm raged on, the wind howling against the walls. But inside Ashford Hall, all eyes were fixed on the strangers who had arrived with the storm, dragged from the dark by the courage of a man and the instincts of a horse who sensed danger long before any human could. As Dr. Harrison hurried through the door, stethoscope already in hand, the clock in the hall struck midnight. Nobody in Ashford Hall could know it yet, but this wild night, this rain-soaked moment, was about to change everything. For the estate, the village, and for Alex Ashford himself. Alex's mind was racing as Artemis pounded through the rain-soaked fields toward Ashford Hall. The woman's limp weight on the saddle behind him, the little girl pressed to his chest. Every second felt like a coin flip between hope and disaster. He glanced down at the child, her cheeks hollow, breath thin, lashes clumped together from rain and tears. His own heart thudded in his ears. She was so light, too quiet. Don't you dare let go. He leaned in close to Artemis, the stallion's mane whipping against his cheek, and shouted into the wind, "Faster, boy! We can do this!" Artemis surged forward, as if understanding the gravity, his powerful legs devouring the ground, mud flying in every direction. Thunder boomed again. Alex's phone, already slippery with rain, buzzed in his jacket. He fumbled, keeping one hand on the child, and managed to thumb out a call to Dr. Harrison, his family's physician. The line crackled as the wind howled around him. "Doc, it's Alex. I need you at the hall. Emergency! 2 lives, child critical. Get here now!" His words tumbled out, broken by wind and worry. The doctor's reply was nearly drowned out, but Alex caught the urgency. "On my way? Prep a fire, towels, glucose, I'll call ahead. Hang on, Alex." The world around him blurred. Flashes of the estate's old stone walls, the ancient oak trees, the barn lights flickering through the storm. The drone of the rain seemed almost unreal, like the background hum of an old war movie. Artemis slid to a halt at the stable doors, nostrils flaring, sweat and rain mingling in his coat. Stable hands rushed to help, their faces pale as they took in the sight. Lord Ashford, wild-eyed and soaked, carrying a woman and a nearly lifeless child. Alex ignored their questions, barking, "Get the first aid kit, bring blankets, tell Mrs. Rowe to boil water, now!" He gently transferred the child into the arms of Mrs. Rowe, the long-serving housekeeper, who gasped at the coldness of the little girl's skin. The woman, the mother, still hadn't regained consciousness. Her lips trembled as Mrs. Rowe wrapped her in towels, murmuring soft words. But as Alex hurried into the house, he caught movement near the hedgerow, a glint of something metallic, a low rustle. He spun, eyes narrowed. For a heartbeat, he saw a figure crouched behind a shrub, camera lens peeking through the leaves. The flash went off, a sharp burst of white. "Paparazzi, here, tonight, damn it!" The Ashfords had been plagued by tabloids before, but never like this. Tonight's storm had brought more than thunder. It had brought the hounds. Inside, the hall was a blur of action. Alex stripped off his jacket, leaving puddles on the polished oak floor. Servants darted back and forth with towels and hot water. Dr. Harrison arrived, hair wild under his cap, black bag already open as he knelt beside the sofa. He examined the child first, brow furrowing. "Severe hypothermia, malnutrition, pulse is faint," he muttered. He gave sharp instructions. "We need warm fluids. Glucose. Keep her skin to skin with someone warm." Alex didn't hesitate. He kicked off his boots and climbed onto the settee, holding the little girl against him beneath a pile of blankets, whispering, "Stay with me. Please." The woman's eyes fluttered open at last. She jerked upright, panic etched in every feature, arms reaching out. "Layla!" Her voice was raw, desperate. Alex caught her hand, calming her. "She's safe, she's here, you're in my home, help is coming." The woman stared at him, eyes wild with fear and confusion, then collapsed back, exhaustion dragging her down. Time seemed to stop. The wind rattled the windows. Dr. Harrison moved between mother and child, working steadily, barely glancing up as the rain continued its relentless assault on the roof. Mrs. Rowe heated milk and honey, the sweet scent mingling with the sharp tang of antiseptic. As the worst of the crisis passed, Alex finally allowed himself a deep, ragged breath. He looked at the woman, her features drawn, skin sallow from fatigue, but beautiful and strong in a way that had nothing to do with looks. He wanted to ask who she was, where she'd come from, but the moment was too fragile. All that mattered was keeping them alive. Meanwhile, outside in the swirling rain, the paparazzi checked his camera, reviewing the images. Lord Ashford, heroic and desperate, cradling an unknown woman and a dying child under the English storm. It was the kind of photo that sold thousands of papers, the kind that could ruin a nobleman's reputation in a single night. Within hours, the first leaks hit the tabloids. Lord Ashford's midnight mystery, "Who's the woman in the storm?" splashed across the digital pages of the Daily Echo, fueling wild speculation. Some whispered it was a love affair, others claimed a scandal from the family's shadowy past. But the truth, as always, was more complicated and more dangerous. Back inside, Alex's mind was already spinning with worry, not just for the lives he'd tried to save, but for the tidal wave that was coming for his family name. He paced the hall while Dr. Harrison tended to his guests, 1,000 questions burning in his chest. He knew the world of privilege could be merciless, and he'd just given the wolves a scent. Yet when he returned to the sitting room and saw the little girl, Layla, begin to stir, her cheeks slowly flushing pink with returning warmth, he felt a small spark of hope. The mother, Maya, as he'd overheard her whisper, was sleeping now, finally safe for a few precious hours. He stood watch at the window, Artemis's silhouette visible in the stable, standing guard against the storm. The night had changed everything. Somewhere in the distance, the lights of the village flickered, gossip already burning through every home. Alex squared his shoulders. No matter what the world said, he knew what he had to do. The honor of the Ashford name meant more than secrets or pride. It meant doing the right thing, even when the world wanted blood. He watched the storm ease, the thunder rolling away, and whispered a silent promise. "I'll protect them, whatever it takes." The battle was only beginning. Morning came to Ashford Hall with a gentle haze and a golden light that seemed determined to wipe away the violence of the stormy night before. Outside, the lawns were silvered with dew, and the distant hills of the Cotswolds glowed under soft sunlight. The only evidence of chaos was the churned mud near the bomb shelter and a few broken branches in the paddock. Birds chirped in the hedges, as if to reassure everyone that, somehow, life would go on. Inside, the grand old house was strangely quiet. Alex hadn't slept. His mind kept replaying the night's events, wondering what more he could have done, what danger still lingered. He checked on Maya and Layla every hour, unable to rest until Dr. Harrison gave him a tired thumbs up and said, "She'll pull through, Alex. But you need to be careful. The child's immune system is shot, and the mother is exhausted beyond reason." Alex nodded, running a hand through his hair. He paced through the wood-paneled halls, the eyes of his ancestors looking down from oil portraits. Lords and ladies in heavy velvet, judges in powdered wigs, all with the same severe Ashford jaw. He wondered what they would say about last night. Would they call him reckless, foolish, or would they see what he saw, a moral line in the mud, a chance to do what was right even when no one was watching? By mid-morning, the house was stirring with the usual quiet activity. The kitchen staff prepping for lunch, the gardeners clearing away storm debris, and Mrs. Rowe softly humming as she arranged flowers in the parlor. The only thing missing was gossip. The servants had seen too much to risk idle chatter. Alex poured himself a cup of Earl Grey, its steam curling into the air, and slipped into the sitting room where Maya and Layla were resting. The child slept deeply, a faint flush back in her cheeks, her tiny hand clutching the edge of a woolen blanket. Maya, propped on a pillow, watched the sunlight flicker on the ceiling with wide, guarded eyes. She startled as Alex entered, instinctively reaching for Layla, but he stopped at the doorway, offering her a warm, cautious smile. "You're safe," he said quietly, setting the teapot on the side table. "I thought you might like some real tea, or coffee if you prefer. We have both. And there's food, if you're hungry." Maya nodded slowly, her accent gentle but uncertain. "Thank you." She sat up, wrapping her arms around her knees, her gaze drifting to the portraits on the walls. "Where are we?" "This is Ashford Hall, my family's home," Alex said, pouring tea for her and sliding a plate of toast and marmalade across the table. He hesitated, then added, "I'm Alexander Ashford, but you can call me Alex." Maya repeated the name softly, almost like she was testing its safety. "I'm Maya. This is my daughter, Layla." Her voice broke on the last word, as if she was still shocked to find her child breathing. Alex sat across from her, elbows on his knees. The sunlight illuminated her face now, showing the faint scars near her hairline, the fine lines of someone who'd lived through too much, too soon. He recognized it, the look he'd seen in soldiers who'd survived war, in victims who carried wounds no one else could see. A moment of quiet stretched between them, filled only by Layla's steady breathing and the faint tick of the clock. Alex sipped his tea and finally asked the question that had burned in him all night. "How did you end up here, Maya?" She drew a shaky breath. "We crossed from Dover, on foot, then in a truck. I'm a nurse from Kabul. I worked for NATO clinics during the war. My husband was killed 2 years ago. After that, things became dangerous. I applied for asylum, but my visa was delayed, and then—" She faltered, knuckles white around her cup. "We tried to stay quiet. I thought I could keep Layla safe. But the cold, I couldn't go any further. Your horse found us? Or maybe it was God, I don't know." Alex felt a weight settle in his chest. He remembered Afghanistan all too well. He'd served as a cavalry officer, lost friends to roadside bombs, seen refugee camps up close. He didn't say any of this aloud. Instead, he nodded and let Maya's story fill the silence. "You don't have to be afraid here," he said softly. "Whatever happens, I won't let anyone hurt you or Layla." Maya blinked hard, tears threatening. "Why are you helping us?" she whispered. Alex looked away, staring at the old family crest carved over the fireplace. "Because I couldn't live with myself if I turned away," he said. "Because I've seen what happens when good people do nothing." Layla stirred, a soft whimper escaping her lips. Maya reached out, pressing her palm to the girl's forehead, her movements both tender and practiced. Alex watched them, struck by the intensity of Maya's love, and by the fear still coiled in her shoulders. He cleared his throat, suddenly awkward. "If you feel strong enough, would you like to meet Artemis? He's the reason I found you. He's got a sixth sense for trouble. And for good people, I think." Maya's lips curved in the faintest smile. The hours drifted by in gentle increments, the worst of the night fading with each minute of warmth and sunlight. Maya nibbled toast, coaxed Layla to sip broth, and gradually allowed herself to believe that for now, the nightmare was paused. Alex checked his phone obsessively, waiting for more word from Dr. Harrison, or perhaps a warning from the outside world. Yet the sense of peace in the great house felt delicate, as if one sharp noise might shatter it. Outside, Artemis grazed quietly, keeping watch on the hall, his ears flicking at every distant sound. For now, Ashford Hall was a sanctuary, the world kept at bay by its old stones and stubborn traditions. But neither Alex nor Maya could ignore the sense that, somewhere out there, the storm hadn't truly ended. It had only shifted form, waiting for its next chance to strike. The next afternoon brought with it a rare sense of calm. The storm had finally blown itself out, leaving behind crisp air and the earthy scent of wet grass. Sunlight glinted off puddles in the cobblestone courtyard as Alex led Maya and Layla out toward the stables. The fields stretched wide and green, glimmering under the late-day light, and for a moment, Ashford Hall felt like a world apart, untouched by suspicion or scandal. Maya was still pale, her steps slow, but there was a steadiness in her arms as she carried Layla, wrapped snug in a borrowed sweater. The little girl's eyes were curious now, wide and dark, tracking every movement of the world around her, as if she was trying to memorize what safety felt like. Alex walked beside them, hands in his jacket pockets, occasionally glancing down to make sure Maya kept her balance on the slick stones. The stables were alive with quiet energy, horses rustling in their stalls, the faint aroma of hay and saddle leather, the warm breath of Artemis rising like steam in the cool air. The big gray Hanoverian stood by his gate, watching the newcomers with ears pricked forward and an intelligence in his gaze that always made Alex feel as if he was being sized up. Maya hesitated at the threshold. Layla squirmed, her tiny fingers reaching toward the horses. Alex smiled gently and nodded for her to come closer. "He won't hurt you," he promised, opening the stall. "In fact, Artemis is the most gentle animal I've ever known. He saved you, didn't he?" Artemis stretched his long neck, sniffing Layla's hand, and snorted softly, as if in greeting. Maya crouched down, holding Layla out so she could stroke the horse's nose. For a moment, Layla froze, unsure. Then Artemis nudged her with his velvet muzzle, and the child let out a small, delighted giggle. Maya's face softened, the lines of fear and exhaustion easing for the first time since she'd arrived. She looked up at Alex, voice trembling but sincere. "Where I'm from, horses are a luxury for the very rich. My father would tell stories about them. He always dreamed of seeing a white horse run through the valley." Alex felt something tighten in his chest. Nostalgia, maybe, or a pang of memory. He knelt beside them, brushing a hand along Artemis's mane. "My father used to say horses don't care about your title. They care about your spirit, your courage, and how gentle your hands are. I grew up learning to ride before I could even read." He glanced at Maya. "Were you always in Kabul?" Maya nodded, her expression distant. "Mostly. I went to nursing school, wanted to help, to make a difference. Then the war came. After I lost my husband, I stayed because there was no one left to take care of the children at the clinic." Her voice faded. She kept stroking Artemis's nose, the motion rhythmic, almost soothing. "You can't imagine what it's like. Bombs going off all night, never knowing if someone you love will come home. I learned how to patch wounds, calm children, find water in the ruins. But I could never keep Layla warm enough in the winter." Alex sat back, arms resting on his knees. For a long moment, the only sound was the soft munching of hay and Layla's quiet babbling. Finally, he spoke. "I do know, a little. I served as a cavalry officer. Different war, different place, but some things stay the same. You lose people, and it never really leaves you. That's why I couldn't turn away last night. Sometimes I dream about the men I lost. IEDs, gunfire, the chaos. When Artemis found you, it felt like, I don't know, like the universe was giving me another chance to save someone." He stopped, realizing how much he'd just revealed. Maya watched him, her dark eyes unblinking. "You saved us," she said quietly. "Even though it put you at risk." Alex looked away, embarrassment coloring his cheeks. It wasn't heroic. It was just right. They fell silent, the kind of comfortable silence that only comes from shared hardship. Layla, emboldened by Artemis's gentle presence, toddled a few wobbly steps toward the horse's flank, arms outstretched. Artemis stood perfectly still, as if understanding how fragile this trust was. Maya straightened and glanced at Alex, curiosity flickering across her features. "Why do you stay here? With all this land, the title, the old house, doesn't it feel like too much to carry sometimes?" Alex chuckled, the sound genuine. "More often than you'd think. There's pressure, expectations from everyone, even the dead relatives on the wall. But this land, these horses, it's home. I'd rather spend 100 hours fixing fences than a minute at a fancy party in London. And lately, I've started to wonder if maybe all this privilege is only worth something if you use it for good." Maya considered that, lips pressed together. She didn't answer, but something in her posture softened. She let herself lean against the stall, watching Layla and Artemis, a tentative hope flickering in her eyes. The afternoon faded gently, the sun painting golden stripes across the stable floor. For the first time since the storm, the air felt light, almost free. Alex and Maya shared stories of lost friends, of hard choices and second chances, while Layla giggled and Artemis stood silent guard over them all. Outside, the world kept turning, but inside the stable something fragile and vital began to grow. A sense of connection, a hope that perhaps, in this unlikely corner of the Cotswolds, two battered souls and a brave little girl might find the beginnings of family. But just as peace settled, Alex's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You're on the front page tomorrow, Lord Ashford. Hope your secrets are worth it." The outside world wasn't far away, after all. By the time the next evening rolled around, word had already begun to spread through the countryside and beyond. It started in whispers. A rumor here, a suspicious glance there, servants murmuring in hallways, the occasional call from a concerned friend to Alex's cell phone. Then came the headlines. Before the sun had even set, a thick bundle of newspapers had landed on the kitchen table at Ashford Hall. One copy left deliberately open, its page splashed with a grainy, rain-streaked photo. Lord Ashford seen late at night with an unknown foreign woman and a child, both in distress. Above it all, the sensationalist banner of the Daily Echo screamed, "Scandal at Ashford Hall, Noble Secrets and Midnight Rescue." Sir Rupert Sterling, owner of the neighboring estate and self-styled defender of traditional English values, wasted no time. He phoned Alex under the guise of neighborly concern, voice oily and smooth. "Ashford, old boy, quite a stir you've caused," he began, barely masking his delight. "The village is abuzz, and frankly, some of the council are uneasy. We don't want a repeat of well, you know, the incident with your cousin in Oxford, do we?" Alex pinched the bridge of his nose, eyes fixed on the rain trailing down the glass. "Rupert, if you've called to gossip, I'm busy. Just looking out for the neighborhood, my friend. You know how fragile reputations are these days," Sir Rupert pressed. "People talk. And with all the trouble in the papers, one must be careful about appearances, you understand." "I care more about saving lives than I do about appearances," Alex said, his tone clipped. "I'd do it again in a heartbeat." There was a pause, a flicker of annoyance from Rupert. "Well, you'll have your chance to explain, I suppose. I'm hosting a little cocktail hour at the Manor tomorrow night. Some of the old crowd, a few new faces from the council. It would mean a lot if you showed up. Calm their nerves, set the record straight." The invitation felt less like a gesture of support and more like a warning. After the call ended, Alex paced the study. The pressure was mounting. A nobleman's legacy, centuries old, could be swept away in a single week by the power of public opinion. He knew that better than anyone. Ashford Hall had survived wars, bankruptcy, scandal, but never before had the stakes felt so personal. Meanwhile, the kitchen buzzed with rumors. Mrs. Rowe shooed away the younger maids, muttering about loose tongues and dangerous words. But even she couldn't stop the steady drip of speculation. Was Maya a fugitive? Was Alex hiding more than just two strangers? The staff eyed the new arrivals with curiosity and, in some cases, suspicion. Alex found Maya sitting quietly by the parlor window, Layla asleep in her arms. The afternoon sun painted gold across the faded wallpaper, but Maya's eyes were clouded, distant. He sat beside her, lowering his voice. "You may notice people watching you, Maya. The village isn't used to outsiders, especially not ones who arrive in the dead of night. I just want you to know. I'll protect you. no matter what the rumors say. Maya managed a faint smile, but her fingers gripped Layla's blanket tighter. "I've lived with worse than gossip," she said softly. "But thank you, Alex." That night, the hallways echoed with the sound of laughter, clinking glasses, and the thump of footsteps as guests arrived at Sir Rupert's cocktail party. Alex donned his sharpest suit, masking his tension with practiced charm. He was greeted at the door with the same forced warmth he'd come to expect from England's upper crust. A handshake too firm, a smile too sharp. The drawing room filled with council members, their spouses, and a few ambitious journalists sniffing for something juicier than last week's fox hunt. Sir Rupert held court near the fireplace, his arm draped around Lady Stirling as he gestured grandly. When Alex entered, the room's conversation faltered just long enough for him to feel the eyes, the unspoken questions. "Ah, Lord Ashford," Rupert crowed, motioning him over. "You've stirred up quite the conversation. Would you care to tell us about your, midnight adventure?" The crowd leaned in, eager for a misstep, a detail they could carry home and share over dinner. Alex drew a breath. He spoke simply, refusing to play to the crowd. "There was a woman and her child, caught in the storm. They were freezing. I helped them. I'd do it again, whether the world watched or not." A few raised eyebrows, a couple of murmured, "Brave of you, Ashford." But most just exchanged glances, the gears of judgment turning behind polished smiles. Rupert's expression soured for just a second before he recovered, raising his glass in a mock toast. "To old-fashioned chivalry, may it never go out of style." The rest of the evening was a blur. Alex endured pointed questions, subtle digs at modern sensibilities, and veiled warnings about the dangers of bringing strangers into our way of life. He smiled, deflected, but inside the conflict churned. Tradition versus conscience, reputation versus what he knew was right. When Alex finally slipped away, the night air was cool against his skin, the distant stables quiet. He paused under the stars, the manor house glowing with laughter behind him, and realized that saving Maya and Layla had cost him something he'd always taken for granted: the easy certainty of his place in the world. He looked back at Ashford Hall. Lights on in the nursery, Maya rocking Layla, Artemis resting watchful in the paddock, and knew with certainty that he'd chosen right, even if the world refused to see it. But deep down, he sensed the real storm had only just begun. The days after the party were marked by a nervous calm that everyone at Ashford Hall could feel, but nobody dared mention. Even the servants moved more quietly, their usual routines tinged with unease. Maya and Layla remained mostly in the private side of the house, spending afternoons in the nursery or wandering the gardens when the weather allowed, always keeping to the edges, always aware of eyes that might be watching. Alex did what he could to shield them, but he felt the pressure mounting with every headline, every curious glance from the villagers, every veiled comment from the council. Late one afternoon, as rain clouds gathered again above the Cotswolds, the fragile peace shattered. The sound of tires crunching over gravel echoed up the drive. Alex was in the tack room, checking over Artemis's saddle, when he heard the doorbell's sharp ring, followed by the hurried footsteps of Mrs. Rowe down the hall. A black Range Rover, government plates flashing, had pulled up to the house. Two figures stepped out, one in a charcoal suit, the other in the crisp, severe uniform of the Home Office. The latter was a woman, her hair pulled back tight, her eyes hidden behind rimless glasses. She moved with purpose, clutching a folder thick with documents. As she approached, Artemis, in the nearest paddock, let out a piercing whinny, stomping and tossing his head, his anxiety plain as day. Alex met the visitors at the door, forcing himself to stand tall. "Good afternoon," he said, voice cool but polite. "Can I help you?" The woman produced a badge with practiced efficiency. "Inspector Bridget Thompson, UK Visas and Immigration. We've received reports of suspicious activity at this residence. I have a warrant to conduct a search." Her voice was clipped. No nonsense. She barely looked at Alex, already scanning the entrance hall, taking in every detail. Alex's stomach tightened. He glanced at the servant behind him, nodded once, then turned to the inspector. "You're welcome to look around, Inspector. May I ask what you're looking for?" She snapped the warrant shut and fixed him with a steely stare. "We've received credible intelligence that you may be harboring persons with unresolved immigration status. If you obstruct this process, you'll be charged." Alex bit back a retort, reminding himself that confrontation would only make things worse. "I'm not obstructing anything, but there's a sick child upstairs. If you must search, please be discreet." Thompson's expression did not change. She stepped inside, her colleague close behind, and began methodically moving through the house. Alex trailed after them, heart thumping, mind racing through worst-case scenarios. The inspector asked terse questions. Names, dates, how long had Maya and Layla been on the premises? What was their relationship to him? Alex answered carefully, every word weighed and measured. "She is a guest in my home. She is seeking asylum. The paperwork is in progress," Inspector Thompson wrote furiously, her eyes flicking up only to scan his face for any sign of deceit. She pressed on. "Did you know you could be prosecuted for providing shelter to someone with an unresolved immigration claim?" "I know the law, Inspector," Alex replied, trying to keep the tension from his voice. "And I know compassion. I will answer for my actions." Meanwhile, Maya, hearing unfamiliar voices and the sound of boots in the hallway, instinctively clutched Layla and ducked into the tack room by the stables. Her breath came fast, her hands shaking as she pressed herself against the door, listening. Artemis, ever vigilant, pawed at the ground, planting himself between Maya and the approaching strangers. The big horse's body became a living barrier, his head lowered, eyes locked on the unfamiliar figures. Inspector Thompson reached the stable doors. Alex stepped in front of her, his voice firmer now. "Please, Inspector. Maya is not a criminal. She's waiting for a humanitarian decision. The child is very sick. This is not a matter for force." Thompson's jaw tightened. For a moment, Alex saw a flicker of something. Doubt, maybe, or the weight of 1,000 other cases just like this one. She hesitated, then relented. "You have 14 days, she said, her voice lower but no less stern. "File the asylum claim. Submit all supporting documents. If not, both will be removed, and you could face charges. Do not think being a lord will protect you from the law or the press." She turned on her heel and swept back to her car, the door slamming behind her. The Range Rover sped down the drive, splattering mud in its wake. The tension in the air hung thick and heavy, as if the storm clouds themselves had settled over Ashford Hall. Maya emerged slowly, her face pale but determined. She looked at Alex, searching his face for answers. "What will happen now?" Alex placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We do this by the book, Maya. I'll call my solicitor tonight. We'll get every paper, every document. I won't let them take you or Layla away. I promise." In the silence that followed, Artemis nuzzled Layla, who managed a tired smile. Even in the shadow of threat, The connection between horse, child, and mother offered a fragile hope. But as evening fell and the news of the Home Office raid began to spread, whispered first by staff, then by villagers, and finally, inevitably, by the press, Alex realized this was only the beginning. The fight ahead would test everything he stood for: loyalty, tradition, and the courage to defy even the highest authorities when justice demanded it. And outside, under the bruised purple sky, Artemis stood guard, as if daring anyone, man or law, to try and break the bonds that had formed at Ashford Hall. The days following Inspector Thompson's visit felt like living beneath a slowly lowering ceiling, pressure mounting with every tick of the clock, the sense of safety that Ashford Hall once offered shrinking under the weight of official threats and public suspicion. For Maya, every creak of the floorboards or ring of the telephone became a source of dread. For Alex, it was a relentless, gnawing anger at the system, at his neighbors, and at the world that seemed determined to punish compassion. Word spread fast. It wasn't just the servants whispering now. Villagers who once waved to Alex in the lane now averted their eyes. In the pub, voices dropped as soon as he entered, only to rise again as he left, rumors feeding on the silence of those who wouldn't or couldn't speak for themselves. The Daily Echo's coverage grew more aggressive, with headlines like "Ashford Hall defies law, illegal migrants sheltered by Lord" splashed across the front page. Alex was no stranger to scrutiny, but this was different. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the lives of a woman and child he'd come to care for deeply. In the midst of the storm, Inspector Thompson's warning echoed through every hallway. 14 days. The Home Office didn't make idle threats. Every evening, Alex pored over documents with his solicitor, making sure every detail of Maya's application was perfect. He filed affidavits, called in favors, and worked late into the night, his eyes burning with exhaustion and stubborn hope. But outside the walls of the estate, another kind of resistance was building. Sir Rupert, never one to miss an opportunity for self-importance, convened a meeting at the village hall. His speech was filled with familiar code words: community values, English traditions, protecting our way of life. But the subtext was clear as day. Outsiders weren't welcome, and anyone who defended them was part of the problem. He circulated a petition calling for Maya and Layla's removal in the interest of public safety. The signatures piled up, fueled by fear, misinformation, and a handful of loud, embittered voices. The sense of siege grew worse with every passing day. Even Artemis picked up on it. The normally steady stallion had become tense and protective, standing sentinel at the paddock fence whenever Maya and Layla ventured outside. Maya herself moved through the house with careful quiet, never quite allowing herself to relax, always half expecting someone to appear at the door with orders to take her away. The atmosphere reached a breaking point one night when a rock crashed through the stable window, shattering glass and sending splinters flying across the straw. Artemis reared in terror, letting out a frantic, high-pitched scream. Maya, who'd been settling Layla for bed in the adjoining tack room, rushed into the chaos, heart pounding as she found Artemis stamping and whirling in panic, his eyes wild. Layla, drawn by the commotion, toddled into the barn, her tiny arms reaching out as Artemis, still panicked, threatened to kick. Maya lunged, scooping up her daughter just in time as the horse's hooves struck the ground where Layla had stood. The moment froze in Alex's memory, a single heartbeat that could have ended in tragedy. He arrived seconds later, breathless, having heard the crash from the house. The sight that greeted him, a terrified Maya clutching her child, Artemis shivering and sweating, the smashed window, ignited something deep and furious inside him. He gathered Maya and Layla into his arms, checking them for injuries, then turned to his stable hands. "Who did this?" he demanded, voice cold as ice. "Did anyone see?" A young groom, pale and shaken, nodded. "I saw some boys running off toward the village, sir. They threw the rock and yelled something about sending her back." Alex clenched his fists, fighting the urge to storm after them. Instead, he knelt beside Artemis, speaking softly until the horse's trembling began to ease. He pressed his forehead to Artemis's and whispered, "I'm sorry, old friend. I'm so sorry." Inside the house, the shock lingered. Maya sat in the nursery, rocking Layla, her face blank with fear and fatigue. Alex tried to reassure her, but his words felt hollow in the face of such hatred. "They're cowards," he said finally. "All of them. And I won't let them win. I promise you, Maya, no one is taking you away. Not while I'm still breathing." But even as he spoke, he knew the danger was rising. If the community could be turned so quickly, what would stop them from escalating? He doubled security on the estate, checked locks twice each night, and made sure that every legal document was in order, ready to be sent at a moment's notice. Inspector Thompson returned once more, stern as ever, to review Maya's asylum paperwork. She made it clear the clock was still ticking. "You have one chance," she warned Alex, her voice almost tired. "Don't waste it, and keep the press out of this if you can." But it was already too late for that. The story had grown larger than any of them could control. It was about more than a lord or a migrant or a frightened village. It was about what kind of place Ashford Hall and England was willing to be. And as the deadline loomed, Alex realized that the only way forward was to fight. Not just for Maya and Layla, but for every principle he'd ever believed in, for the soul of the land he called home. That night, as a cold wind rattled the windows and the last lights went out in the village, Alex made a silent vow. Whatever it took, he would stand his ground. He would not be the last Ashford to turn away from someone in need. Not now. Not ever. Sleep was scarce at Ashford Hall as the deadline approached. Alex's jaw ached from grinding his teeth through endless meetings with his solicitor. Maya's hands never stopped moving, folding clothes, tending to Layla, pacing the edges of rooms as if measuring how much space they might be forced to leave behind. Outside, Artemis roamed restlessly, senses on edge, as if he too could sense that the ground was shifting beneath all their feet. The final straw came with another headline, this time a double-page spread in the Daily Echo. The photos were sharper, the captions crueler. "Ashford Lord defies the law, village in uproar." The article recycled every ugly rumor, painting Alex as a naive fool and Maya as a dangerous criminal. Comments online grew uglier by the hour. At breakfast, Alex opened his phone to find his inbox flooded with hate mail and anonymous threats. Layla's name appeared in the filthiest posts, and for the first time, Alex realized how far people would go to destroy what they didn't understand. He slammed the phone down, breathing hard. "That's it," he muttered, eyes blazing. "If they want a fight, they'll get one, but on my terms." Maya watched him with wary hope, a question on her lips. "You're not giving up?" "Never," Alex said. "But hiding in the shadows hasn't helped us. It's time we tell our side, all of it." He called his friend Isla, a London human rights lawyer, and explained the whole story. Every detail, every risk. Isla listened quietly, then said, You're not just fighting for Maya and Layla anymore, Alex. This could set a precedent. If you want to take a stand, do it publicly, but do it right. I'll draft the paperwork. You prepare your statement. They drove to London the next morning. Alex wore his only suit. Maya bundled Layla in her warmest coat. Artemis watched them leave, ears pricked, as if understanding that this journey was as important as any battle he'd ever run. The drive was tense. Layla dozed on Maya's lap, while Alex rehearsed his words over and over, his stomach churning with nerves and resolve. At Isla's office, the atmosphere was all business. She had prepared documents for Alex to sign, officially offering to be Maya's legal sponsor, using his title and resources as collateral. This is more than paperwork, Isla warned, her tone grave. If you put your name on this, you'll be in the fight until the end. There's no going back. Alex signed without hesitation. If it helps them stay, I'll do whatever it takes, Isla nodded. Now for the other part, the public. I know a journalist who owes me a favor, and I think you should live stream your statement. Don't let the tabloids twist your story. Own it. That night, in a small conference room overlooking the London skyline, Alex opened his laptop, hit record, and told the world the truth. He spoke not as a lord, but as a neighbor, a witness, a man who'd seen suffering and refused to walk away. He told Maya's story, her work as a nurse, her flight from violence, her courage in the face of impossible odds. He told of Layla's sickness, of Artemis's role in their rescue, of the village's fear and the ugliness it had brought out. But he also spoke of hope, the acts of kindness, the few villagers who left food at the gate, the staff who stood by them despite everything. The Ashford name has always stood for more than just land and privilege, he said. It's supposed to mean service, noblesse oblige. I'd rather lose my title than my conscience. The live stream took off. Within minutes, the hashtag #Ashford stands for kindness began trending across social media. People from across the country and beyond posted messages of support. Others shared stories of their own struggles with the immigration system, their gratitude for strangers who'd helped them when no one else would. The journalist Isla published a balanced piece, factual, humane, on a respected national site. Suddenly, the narrative shifted. The old scandal headlines were replaced by questions about the Home Office's cruelty, about the power of tradition to change for the better. But Alex's boldness had another effect, too. With the spotlight came scrutiny, and with scrutiny came cracks in the village's facade. An anonymous tip to the press revealed that Sir Rupert, so loudly championing English values, had been quietly funneling profits into offshore accounts to avoid taxes. Within a day, the villagers' attention was split. Half the town now whispered about Sir Rupert's hypocrisy, while others cautiously began to ask if maybe, just maybe, Alex was right. Back at Ashford Hall, Maya watched the world turn through her phone, stunned by the outpouring of support and shaken by the sudden vulnerability of fame. She wasn't used to being seen, but for the first time in months, she felt something like hope. Fragile, yes, but real. Alex, meanwhile, paced the halls, adrenaline and anxiety warring in his veins. He knew the fight wasn't over. The law still loomed. The deadline still ticked closer, but the darkness had shifted. For the first time since the stormy night when Artemis cried out in the rain, it felt like they had a chance. Late that evening, as the house grew quiet, Alex found Maya by the window, looking out at Artemis grazing in the moonlight. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice raw with gratitude and disbelief. "For everything." Alex shook his head, voice gentle. No, thank you, for letting me do what's right. Outside, a single owl called through the night. The old house seemed to breathe easier, its walls holding not just secrets, but courage and the possibility of a new beginning. For the first time in weeks, a hush settled over Ashford Hall that didn't feel like fear. It felt like anticipation, the breathless waiting of people who'd fought hard and could do nothing more but hope. The rain had finally given way to a crisp, clear evening. Lights glowed in every window, and the warmth of the old house, once tinged with tension, now felt protective and soft, like a blanket pulled up over weary shoulders. Alex sat at his desk late into the night, phone silent at last, reading and rereading the final message from Isla. Application complete. Case escalated. Expect a response within 48 hours. Fingers crossed, my friend. He let out a long breath, realizing only then how tightly he'd been wound, how much of himself he'd poured into these weeks of resistance. All he could do now was wait, and trust that the right people would see what he'd seen from the very first moment Artemis cried out in the storm. Maya found him there, elbows on the desk, head in his hands. She crossed the room quietly, Layla clinging sleepily to her hip, and sat beside him. For a while, neither spoke. There was no need. In silence, they watched Layla play on the thick rug, Artemis's carved likeness standing watch on the mantelpiece, a silent reminder of how far they'd come. "Do you ever wish you'd done things differently?" Maya asked finally, her voice quiet but steady. "That you just called the police that first night?" Alex shook his head, looking at her with the weary honesty of someone who'd run out of pretense. "Not once. If I had, I wouldn't have been able to look myself in the mirror. Sometimes it's easy to know what's right. The hard part is living with the fallout." She smiled, brushing Layla's hair from her eyes. "You risked so much for us. For a while I thought I might never be safe again. But now I see what's possible when someone truly cares." They sat together in the lamplight, trading stories of Kabul, of family, of childhood games played on distant hills. Alex spoke of his ancestors, of the centuries-old pressure to live up to a name. "I always thought noblesse oblige meant charity, polite donations at Christmas, a smile for the staff, a speech at the harvest fair. But it's not that. It's standing up when it's hardest. It's giving up your comfort so someone else can breathe." Outside, Artemis shifted in his stall, wickering softly as the night deepened. The stables were alight with the golden glow of old bulbs, the sweet scent of hay hanging in the air. Alex suggested they join him, one more ritual before whatever tomorrow would bring. Together, Alex, Maya, and Layla stepped into the barn. The world outside was hushed, the moon bright above the paddocks. Artemis greeted them with a gentle nudge, lowering his head for Layla's small hand. The little girl giggled, tension melting from her features as she pressed her cheek to the stallion's neck. Maya leaned into the warmth of the moment, her eyes shining. "He knew we needed help. Even when I'd given up, Artemis didn't. Sometimes I think animals see the truth in people better than we do." Alex stroked Artemis's mane, his voice low and thoughtful. "He's always had a sense for what's right and what's dangerous. Maybe that's all anyone needs. Courage and kindness, even when it isn't easy." A familiar chime broke the quiet, the ping of Alex's phone. He hesitated, heart in his throat, then unlocked it with shaking hands. The message was short, official, from the Home Office. He read it twice, then handed the phone to Maya, unable to trust his own voice. "Your humanitarian application is under review," she read, her breath trembling. "And you are granted temporary leave to remain. You may stay pending a final decision. Welcome Ms. Rahimi and Layla to the United Kingdom." For a moment, the world stopped. Layla squealed, sensing her mother's joy. Maya pressed a hand to her mouth, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. Alex felt his own eyes burn with relief and gratitude. Every hardship and sleepless night culminating in this simple, precious reprieve. Later they sat together in the barn, arms entwined around Layla, Artemis standing guard beside them. The hush was filled with possibility. For the first time, Alex let himself imagine a future, one where Maya and Layla could stay, where Ashford Hall could be not just a sanctuary for tradition, but a beacon for what was possible when compassion led the way. He thought of the lessons learned in these long weeks, the cost of courage, the loneliness of being right when the world is loud with wrong, the unexpected allies found in moments of greatest need. He thought of his ancestors and knew, without doubt, that the truest legacy was not pride or wealth or a name in a ledger, but the willingness to risk everything for someone else's chance at peace. Voice soft in the golden light, Alex spoke to Maya and to himself. Compassion isn't weakness. It's the hardest thing there is. This place, it's stronger now because you're here. And so am I. They let the night wrap around them, the old house and stables standing watch over a hard-won peace, while the world outside, noisier and crueler than ever, waited for the next headline. For tonight, Ashford Hall was quiet, its walls holding not just memories, but hope. Dawn arrived at Ashford Hall wrapped in gold and birdsong, as if the land itself was eager to celebrate the end of a long ordeal. The village beyond was slow to wake, still caught in the hush of early morning, but the estate was alive with gentle movement. The clink of tack in the stable, Layla's laughter echoing off the garden walls, Maya's voice humming an old lullaby she'd almost forgotten she knew. Alex stood at his window, coffee in hand, watching the world unfurl beneath a sky scrubbed clean by weeks of rain. He felt changed, as if the storm that had battered his land had also worn new paths in his heart. In the weeks that followed the Home Office's decision, life at Ashford Hall found a new rhythm. The fear that once haunted every shadow was replaced by a tentative, stubborn hope. Maya grew stronger each day, her cheeks regaining color, her laugh more frequent and less cautious. Layla bloomed. Her appetite returned, her steps grew steadier, and she learned to call Artemis by name, giggling as the big horse dipped his head to let her stroke his nose. The estate's staff, once wary, now offered small kindnesses, an extra bowl of soup, fresh bread for Maya's breakfast, a wooden toy left outside Layla's door. Even Mrs. Rowe, who'd spent her life upholding tradition with an iron will, began to see something in the newcomers that reminded her why kindness mattered more than custom. As for Alex, he felt a responsibility deeper than the one he'd inherited with his family name. He spent hours with Maya and Layla, showing them the grounds, introducing them to the rhythms of English country life. On weekends, he and Maya would walk the boundary fences together, Layla toddling ahead, Artemis grazing nearby, always watchful. With each shared story and smile, Alex sensed that Ashford Hall was finally becoming the kind of home he'd always wanted it to be. Not just a fortress of the past, but a sanctuary for anyone willing to call it home. One crisp morning, Maya saddled Artemis for the first time, her confidence restored. With Alex steadying Layla in front of her, they set out across the misty paddocks. The old stallion moved gently, aware of his precious cargo, and the sight of them, mother, child, and horse, struck Alex with a gratitude so fierce he had to blink back tears. The three of them rode side by side as the sun broke over the hills, and in that light, everything seemed possible. But outside the sanctuary of Ashford Hall, the world still churned. The controversy had faded, but not vanished. Sir Rupert's scandal was now the talk of the county, his campaign for English purity unraveling as villagers learned of his tax evasion and double dealing. In the pub, opinions shifted. Some still grumbled about outsiders, but more and more, people recalled how Alex had always lent a hand, never asked for praise, and had the courage to defy even his own circle for what was right. Alex saw a new opportunity in the wake of all that turmoil. He wrote a letter, first draft in a furious scrawl, then revised by Maya's careful hand, calling on the village council to establish a fund for local refugee families. He named it Bridging Rains, in honor of Artemis, whose instincts had saved more than one life that night in the rain. The letter closed with a simple truth. Kindness does not weaken us. It makes us stronger. The only legacy worth leaving is one that opens doors for others. He posted it online and sent copies to every household in the village. Within days, support began to trickle in. Money, clothing, volunteer hours, even an old cottage offered by a widower who remembered being helped by strangers during the war. It wasn't easy. There were arguments, resistance, setbacks, but the tide had turned, and each act of generosity seemed to spark another. One Sunday, the estate hosted a gathering, less formal than the parties of the past, but warmer by far. Neighbors and newcomers mingled over tea and scones. Layla chased the dogs on the lawn, and Maya showed curious children how to braid flowers into Artemis's mane. Alex stood with Maya at the edge of the crowd, watching as the divisions that once seemed so vast melted away in the sun. Near the end of the day, Alex gave a short speech from the old stone steps. No script, no grand gestures, just the quiet conviction of a man who'd seen the best and worst of his home. Privilege is only useful if it helps someone else, he told them. Strength isn't just in what we defend, but in what we're willing to change. And sometimes, it's the most unlikely friend, a child, a stranger, even a horse, that reminds us what it means to be human. The applause was genuine, not loud, but lasting. As people drifted home, Alex caught Maya's hand in his and squeezed it. The unspoken promise between them as solid as the land beneath their feet. That evening, with the house quiet and the sky streaked in lavender and gold, Alex sat down to record a final message for the Bridging Rains Fund's website. He spoke simply, hoping his words would echo beyond the bounds of Ashford Hall. Let kindness lead you. Don't be afraid to risk your comfort for someone else's safety. The measure of a place and of a life is how it treats the stranger at the gate. You never know. By opening your doors, you might just save yourself. He ended with a smile. If this story touched you, please share it. Follow our journey. Together, we can turn every storm into a new beginning. As dusk fell over the Cotswolds, Ashford Hall stood firm and welcoming, a place shaped not just by history, but by the courage to choose compassion, again and again.